All righty, here we go. It's Thursday, which means another brand new edition of Bet Parks Presents Stick to Hockey Live. Jason Bertitas, Anthony DeMarco from the fourthperiod.com going to join us in just a moment. We've got a ton to talk about in this episode, but let me tell you first and foremost about the all-new Bet Parks app. Now, I was on the app last night. I did Eitan's radio show yesterday on The Gambler, and I gave him a 4-leg parlay last night. Here's what it was. I gave him Carolina to win game 2 and take the 2-0 series lead against the Bruins at minus 120. I gave him Tampa on the road to bounce back at plus 112. I gave him the Wild in game 2 to even that series at minus $137. And I gave him Edmonton in a 60-minute three-way line at minus 130. All 4 hit at plus 1,089. Those are the 4 plays I gave on the program yesterday. And boom, plus 1,089 was the 4-leg parlay. And it hit. It's a good night. That's a good night on the Bet Parks app. So take it from me. Check out the new Bet Parks app. To combine all those things is simple. It's so easy to do. It's easy to sign up. It's easy to use. It's easy to figure out how to do that right there on the bet slip. You can bet those individually. You can combine them. You can do whatever you want. I also had McDavid to score first, which I didn't put out on his show, but I didn't cash that. Draisaitl did. But it's faster to win than ever before. So check out the new Bet Parks app. You're going to love it. Right now, all Bet Parks users, new and existing, use the promo code JASON750, and you're going to get a $750 risk-free bet. Again, new and existing users, put in JASON750 and in the promo code and take advantage of that up to $750 risk-free bet. Terms and conditions do apply. So check that out. You will not regret it. Tone's Takes is coming up today. Tone will join us coming up in just a little while, give his plays as the playoffs are underway. So make sure you download the all-new Bet Parks app right now and check it out. Get acclimated. Get in on the fun. Hoops playoffs, hockey playoffs, and much more. You do need to be over 21 and present in Pennsylvania or New Jersey. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Again, Tone Takes coming up in about 30 minutes, a little bit more than that. And we'll get his plays as well. But joining us right now from the fourthperiod.com, he joins us every Thursday. Does a great job. From north of the border, it's Anthony DeMarco on Bet Parks Presents Stick to Hockey Live. What's going on, Ant?
Not much, buddy. Been enjoying some playoffs, man. It's nice to watch a meaningful hockey for the first time in a few months, eh?
Oh, my goodness. It's been awesome. Like from the Ranger-Pittsburgh game with Louis Domingue coming in after hot pork and broccoli.
Yeah.
In overtime. That's the first time that's ever happened. A goalie that has not played in regulation come in an overtime and gotten a win in the Stanley Cup playoffs. What a scenario.
Yeah, he didn't play the first 60 or more than that, 89 minutes or something, and still managed to make 17 saves. But yeah, that was a hell of a game, man. And it goes to show that I think that a lot of people underestimated the Penguins coming in. You know, the Rangers go in with arguably the best goaltender in the NHL, arguably a Hart Trophy candidate favorite. And there you have the Penguins going with their second string and then their third string, and they still absolutely obliterate the Rangers in terms of expected goals and all that. And they deservedly won that game. The Penguins are just a team. And I know Charlie O'Connor always says it when people try and doubt the Penguins. He always comes back with the great line of show me the body. And it seems like time and time again, they continue to prove everyone wrong.
No body, no crime.
That's it.
That's what it is. I kind of subscribe to the Jim Boomer Gordon line of thinking that eventually the credit card bill comes due for a team like the Penguins, but they've dodged the bill collectors for years and years and years. And, in that game, I mean, it's insane when you look at the fact that Igor Shesterkin makes 79 saves in a loss.
Yeah.
That's stunning to me.
But that's kind of been the tale of the story, right? For the Rangers all this year. I know they improved at the trade deadline when they made the addition, specifically Andrew Kopp, but I don't think they were as good as their record showed. And I think the number one reason is their center depth is not all that much to write home about. And they were just a very good special teams group, specifically on the power play. But 5-on-5, they leave something to be desired. And I think we saw that in the first game against the Penguins. I think the Penguins had like over 8 expected goals for, which is absolutely absurd. Obviously, when you play almost 2 games in one night, that will obviously drive up the total expected goals and all the high danger chances, specifically from a team like the Penguins. But, I actually predicted the Penguins in 6. So I'm looking pretty good right now, but certainly that was not the favorite going in, I would say, for most people.
I still like the Rangers in the series. We'll see if Jari comes back for game 3. And what he's going to be when he comes back, I think is a big part of it. But, the Penguins full value, 25-8, they outshoot the Rangers in the second period.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a Penguins franchise record for shots in a period in a playoff game as well. I mean, that's absurd numbers, but Shesterkin, the game should have never went to overtime because I don't think that was goalie interference on the Capital play.
Yeah, it's so questionable right nowadays. Like there's such a gray area now between goalie interference that I don't even attempt to try and figure it out anymore. Like it's almost as if the goalposts change depending on what ref you get nowadays. Yeah. So honestly, like I just steer clear of that. Like we saw a goalie interference play last night with Boston and the Rain and the Hurricanes rather. And originally they had it 5 minutes and it got reduced to a 2-minute minor rather. And look, like, was that goalie interference on Pastrnak? Probably, but at the same time, like he puts his arm up because he's trying to brace for a fall there. And it wasn't like he was so far out of the crease that Ranta that is. So I don't know. It's very unclear. There's a lot of gray areas, and I don't even attempt to try and understand it anymore.
Yeah, the one with Pastrnak and Ranta, like that's incidental contact to me. Pasternak's not a guy that does that kind of shit.
Yeah.
And it's a shame because, now, Carolina is down to their third as well. Alex Lyon, I imagine, is going to get the call up to be the backup now from the Checkers. And so we'll see how that plays out. But just crazy developments that they still find a way to win games because that's what Carolina is. I played them last night as well. So we'll see how that goes. And then last night, some good games on the card last night. The Leafs get back to square or the Lightning get back to square against the Leafs, but there was a little bit of a scare in this game. They were 5-1, and they only hang on and win 5-3.
Yeah, the Leafs are pushing, and it's been some capitalizing on shorthanded chances by the Maple Leafs. Like, I think the Leafs are winning the special teams battle, although I think the Lightning scored 3 times on the power play last night. And this is a high-octane series, a lot of firepower and a lot of feistiness. The Leafs go in with Kyle Clifford and Wayne Simmons in Game 1. Clifford gets suspended. Simmons takes 2 undisciplined penalties last night. A lot of the narrative has been surrounding their respective fourth lines. Obviously, Corey Perry doing his best to antagonize. Pat Maroon taking some, I would say, Pat Maroon-like penalties in the early going. Mm-hmm. But when you have teams with this much toughness simultaneously with that much skill, you're going to get an entertaining series. And, it seems like there's been a lot of blowouts, at least in Game 1. But then in Game 2, we think we're going to see a blow, and the Leafs make it interesting again. Another shorthanded goal by, this time it was Alex Kerfoot off of a brilliant play by TJ Brody. But it was insane. TJ Brody won the most underrated defenseman in the NHL, along with Chris Tanev, who was just absolutely brilliant out in Calgary. 2 guys I really wanted the Flyers to pick up in the 2020 offseason to kind of replace Matt Niskanen. But that's water under the bridge now. But yeah, it's that series has lived up to the hype. That and Minnesota and St. Louis for sure.
Yeah, and Marner again last night, a goal and an apple as well. So he's off to a good start. Matthews is on the board in Game 1, so that kind of takes them out of the pressure cooker a little bit too. You worried about Florida at all?
You know what? I picked Florida to win in 7. And among the TFP guys, I was the only one who predicted to go that long. So most were in 5. I believe 1 or 2 were in 4. And I'm not as high on Florida as the rest of, people, because 1, the goalie scares the hell out of me. Now, that's not to say that they're completely hitched to Sergei Bobrovsky. They can always switch to Spencer Knight if need be. But I also was skeptical on how they would handle playoff hockey against a big, tough team like Washington. And that's a veteran team that have gone deep before. They've won a cup before. Laviolette, one of the more experienced coaches in the NHL, up against a rookie coach and Andrew Brunette. And look, I still do think the Panthers will come out with the victory just because I'm not sold on Washington's goaltending either. And I don't think Florida tested Vanacek nearly as much as they should have. But I don't think it's going to be a walk in the park like many thought. I have this going 7, and I'm standing by that right now.
Yeah. The one thing that scares me a little bit is that, you look at it and the way Florida plays is not traditionally a way to win playoff hockey. That's the thing. The trading chance nature that they go with and go, okay, we'll outscore you isn't something that really has worked in the Stanley Cup playoffs. So that's my only concern there, but we'll see how that plays out. But let's get to, I was listening to Freege this morning, Elliot Friedman on NHL Network Radio does his Thursday hit with Scotty Lachlan and Gord Stellick. And he brought up this same notion yet again. Now, I've heard him, I think, on 32 Thoughts in 2 successive episodes, and also this morning talk about Bruce Boudreau and what's going on out there with Jim Rutherford and the Canucks. And, that they're not going to come to an extension because he didn't coach a full season out in Vancouver. That's kind of Rutherford's rub here, I guess. In other words, they haven't come to an agreement, and they have basically till the end of May to decide if they want to dance together into the future or if they want to part ways on either side. And the one thing that Freege keeps mentioning is that I wonder if Chuck Fletcher will ask to seek permission to talk to Bruce Boudreau, because those two obviously have a history together. He hired him in Minnie, and the Flyers are looking for a coach. And there was some conjecture that Vancouver hired him in short order as the Flyers were getting their ass handed to them against Tampa that night, 7-1, when they fired AV the next morning, that they were going to try and hire him that night. So is Bruce Boudreau now in play as a potential coaching candidate for the Flyers?
I think absolutely. Like, obviously,
they have to.
I mean, they have the ties going back to Minnesota. And look, Bruce Boudreau is a coach that I think is polarizing for a lot of people. Obviously came out of the gate really hot when he joined Washington. I believe he came there in 08-09 season.
Yeah, he was interim coach and got him to the playoffs.
Exactly. Just kind of came out of left field, took them to the President's Trophy. I believe it was 09-10 when they won the President's Trophy.
Yep.
Then got bounced in 7 games by the Montreal Canadiens, one of the bigger upsets. Although the Montreal
Halak.
That's it
by himself, basically.
I believe that's when Boudreau said he was having nightmares about Yaro Halak. And I remember living here in Montreal. That's when they came out with the stop sign with Halak in the middle.
Yeah.
And, I think that on a side note, Montreal just seems like they're always the team that causes the biggest upsets historically, at least since the 05 lockout. But Boudreau, he's had a successful coaching career over the last 15 years or so. Like, obviously, his early years in Washington, goes to Anaheim, could never really get them over the hump, but it felt like there was, like, every year Anaheim finished at the top of the old Pacific Division, or then the current Pacific Division, went to a couple Western Conference finals, then goes to Mini. Felt like by the time he got to Mini, things were kind of, like, changing there. And he kind of got there maybe a year or two too late. But I believe it may have been Russ Cohen, if I'm not mistaken, or someone else on that hockey buzzcast or whatever it's called, that said that playing for Bruce Boudreau is like playing for your grandfather. And I found that absolutely hilarious. And I think that style of coaching may be what the Flyers need. But on the other hand, maybe they also need a veteran. I'm of the belief that they need a veteran coach in here. I know that some people have floated names like Montgomery, possibly David Quinn, newer school guys like that. I'm not opposed against that, but I just think that this group, how fragile they are, trying to get it back on the rails here, ideally to get back in the playoffs. I think having a veteran coach, but also who's good with younger players, may be the best course of action. And Boudreau seems to fit that bill.
Well, he fits the bill with something else that Chuck Fletcher said, too. Chuck Fletcher said, we need to be a team that possesses the puck more. And what do Bruce Boudreau teams do? They own the puck, right? And all his teams have a common denominator. They score. Yeah. They just do. What do the Flyers struggle at most?
Score.
Playing in the offensive zone and creating good chances. They seemed like they had to work so hard to get a good scoring chance. So few chances off the rush. Boudreaux teams don't suffer from that. Now, the Flyers need to add some talent to really take advantage of what Bruce does. But the notion, too, is that, well, Boudreaux, good regular season coach, but doesn't do anything in the playoffs because he had those Capitals teams that won President's trophies but didn't go far and kept getting bounced by the Penguins. But he did get to a conference final in Anaheim. Let's not act like he didn't do that.
Yeah, and those weren't tremendous Anaheim teams. Like, let's be real. To me, that era of the Ducks always kind of felt like pretenders. And he was a guy who really pushed the right buttons there. The later years of Perry there, Ryan Getzlaf and all that. But I think he's a good coach. Do I think that he's going to come in here and be the final piece to the puzzle, like a closer, kind of like what you expected out of AV when they hired him 3 years ago? Or Laviolette back in 2009, 2010? Of course not. But I think they need a coach here to really help develop some young players. And you're absolutely right. They possess the puck. And that's why when I heard Chuck say that, I kind of rethought Paul Maurice, because I don't think Paul Maurice in Winnipeg was a guy who possessed the puck. By a lot of underlying metrics, the Jets weren't a good team. They were a team that relied on elite level goaltending and how dangerous their forwards were off the rush and making the most out of limited chances. And is that the type of roster the Flyers have here? I mean, maybe the goalie, but that's a lot to ask of Carter Hart to get to Hellebuck of last year's level. And they certainly don't have the firepower that the Winnipeg Jets do. So, but then again, Maurice, I think, is a coach that could adapt. And then you look at a guy like John Tortorella. Are they a puck possession team typically under Tortorella? So, I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to Tortorella. I wouldn't be opposed to Paul Maurice. But based on what Fletcher has brought up, it seems like Bruce Boudreau would almost be the ideal guy here.
Yeah, and not only from, like we just talked about, the hockey element of, system and style of play and puck management, but also from personality. Is it like you said, Russ said on the Buzzcast, it's like playing for your grandfather. You never want to disappoint your grandfather.
That's it.
And Gabby's like one of the great personalities in hockey too. Like he's a goofy guy and a lovable figure. Everybody loves him. So, I mean, the only way I could see, another team that could get in the mix that could jump in front of the Flyers. Two teams, actually. One would be if Vegas moved on from Pete DeBoer, which I don't think they're doing because, he wants to win a cup. And obviously you look with Eichel there and Stone and a healthy Vegas team, then maybe you can make the case that that's a really good opportunity. And then the other one would be if the Leafs failed again and Dubas got fired and Sheldon Keefe was relieved and he would take that Toronto job because that's the dream job.
Yeah. He's a Toronto guy. He's an open Maple Leafs fan.
Yep.
And I think there were talks last offseason or this offseason prior that would be the only team that he would consider being an assistant coach for.
Yeah, that was last offseason.
No, okay, it was last offseason. Yeah. So, look, I think that they're going to hang on to Sheldon Keefe, but, I think that if the Flyers want him, assuming he doesn't stick around in Vancouver, they can get him easily. And I think that might be more attractive than, let's say, pursuing a guy like Paul Maurice, because I think Paul Maurice will be at the top of the list of many candidates, or for many teams, rather.
I agree.
I
think he's on a lot of lists.
Paul Maurice, to me, I think just the fact of how long he stuck around in Winnipeg in a world, or a hockey world, rather, where the shelf life of the average coach is 3.5 seasons.
Yeah.
And even that nowadays seems long. And you look at a team like the Flyers, where they're going to be on to coach number 7 since 2013. And, I brought this up earlier today on Brotherly Pod, where there's a strong correlation between long tenured coaches and successful teams. Like, how long has Sullivan been with Pittsburgh? How long has Cassidy been with Boston? How long has Cooper been with Tampa? Like, all these teams have long-standing coaches. You can't just keep turning it over and turning it over and turning it over. And that's not to say that, Mike Yeo or AV or Scott Gordon were, God's gift to coaching. But I still do think that from an optics standpoint, and from an outsider's perspective, and, I live up here in Canada, completely out of the Philadelphia market, a lot of people talk about how bad it looks from an outside perspective, that this team just can't seem to find a coach. And, people used to call it the goalie graveyard. Now it kind of seems like a coaching graveyard.
Yeah, well, you're right. And the goalie part of it is also one of the elements. Show me a good coach, I'll show you a good goalie.
Yeah.
Like look at all the coaches that tend to have tenure. They're guys like Barry Trotz, even though he wasn't in Washington that long, that's a very unique circumstance. In Nashville forever, had great goaltending. Going to be in New York for a long time, has good goaltending. Part of that is his system, no doubt. Yeah. But you look at the situations and teams that don't have goaltending. Look what's going on in Edmonton. Look what's going on in other places where, Montreal's kind of the outlier because they've had Price, but they've kind of churned through a few guys now as well. So how that kind of plays out, we'll see. But yeah, I mean, when you have that constant turnover of coaches and front office, it's not a good look from the outside. You go from Holmgren to Hextall to Fletcher. I mean, that's 3 in less than a decade, in about a decade, right? And then, I mean, the good franchises like Tampa, ICYMI left on his own accord.
And it's still kind of like the same regime, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's Julien Brisebois who studied at his knee.
Yeah. And it's the same scouting staff. His name escapes me. I forget what his name is, but a brilliant guy who runs their scouting department. And that's why, like, for so many people, there's just like, fire Fletcher, fire this guy. It's just like, look, I'm not going to sit here and defend Chuck Fletcher. The majority of his tenure here has been a disaster. But, like, do you know how much work it entails to gut a front office completely and then restart? And then you have to go with the coaches, and then they have to evaluate the roster because, the entire roster is not the one that they probably envision. Like, I've said it for a while here that Fletcher has been kind of trying to make do with what his predecessor left him. And I just think that, like, again, like trying to fire another GM when you're still have non-sustainability behind the bench, it would just cause another wrinkle of things that you have to improve before you get to the actual on ice product. Yeah. Like, they have to fix the roster. Now they have to They already fired the coach. Now they have to hire a coach. If they fired the GM, then they would have to hire another GM. And, if Fletcher goes, that means Brent Flair goes, and then you have to fire another AGM. And I just don't think people realize how much work it entails and how much time and investment it would take to overhaul a front office in addition to a coaching staff.
Because the new front office comes in, then they have to start from scratch to hire a coaching staff and a direction. There's a lot that goes into that. And look, one thing about Fletcher and Flair, that combo, they've drafted well. They haven't drafted the superstars here yet. They haven't been in position to do so. And we don't know on guys like Tyson Forster what he's going to be at the NHL level. We just don't know that yet. But you look at what he did in Minnesota and like most of that core. Now, Billy Guerin coming in after Paul Fenton has done a good job of putting them in the position they're in.
Yeah.
But you look at it, I mean, Spurgeon, you look at obviously Kaprizov, and a guy told me the other day on Twitter, he goes, Kaprizov was a no-brainer. I'm like, dude, he was taken in the 5th round. And nobody had any brains for 5 rounds of that draft if he was a no-brainer.
Yeah, that entire team, like you saw what Eriksson Ek did last night. Yeah. That was Fletcher, Flair, Jared Spurgeon, like you mentioned, Matt Dumba, Jonas Brodin, Jordan Greenway. These are all Fletcher, Flair guys. Like, yes, like along the way you had Zuccarello signed. That was Paul Fenton. I believe Ryan Hartman was Paul Fenton as well. Mm-hmm. Then Bill Guerin comes in. He adds some good depth pieces at the deadline, like Jacob Middleton, trades for Marc-Andre Fleury. A few other names that are escaping me as well.
Delorier.
And then they traded for Tyson Jost, I believe, at the deadline as well. So, look, Guerin has done a good job of insulating that team of the pre-existing core that was assembled by Fletcher and Flair. And I think my biggest criticism of Chuck Fletcher has been his inability to put a team over the top. We saw that at the 2020 trade deadline. That was a team that was rocking and rolling, the hottest team in the NHL, and he goes out and gets Derek Grant and Nate Thompson. Yeah. Like, that to me was arguably his biggest mistake, is how he handled that deadline. But in terms of drafting and developing good, solid NHL players that could lead a team, I don't think that there's any way that you could kind of criticize Chuck Fletcher and Brent Flair more specifically.
Yeah, I agree. And one of the things that Chuck said in his availability, and naturally, hockey Twitter and Flyers Twitter grabbed onto this, was that we're just sitting down now to begin the process and figuring out what the ideal candidates look like, and we'll put that together. See, I hear that, and people are going, AV was fired in December. Why are they just doing this now? I can assure everybody that is total and complete bullshit. This process started in January once they settled with Mike Yeo and they said, okay, he's going to be our GM the rest of the year. Just GMs in sports, coaches, they do not tell the truth. People go, why lie about it? Where's the upside? Well, first of all, you don't want to kind of piss on the guy's leg who is the interim.
Exactly.
We've been looking all along. You want to make it, and that guy knows it too. He's not an idiot, They know it too, but they don't go out publicly and say, yeah, we've been looking since January while we said we were going to give Mike Yeo a fair shake, or Scott Gordon back in 18-19. It just doesn't work like that. Chuck said the same thing about the coaching search after the 18-19 season. And literally 7 days after the season, 5 days after his availability, Elaine Vigneault, Mike Therrien, and Mike Yeo were hired as the next coaching staff. Yeah. That didn't come together in 5 days.
and that, you don't want to completely kick Mike Yeo in the nuts on the way out, right? Like,
Especially when Mike, he was in an impossible situation.
I felt so bad for him. And look, I've been very open that I've never thought much of Mike as a head coach in the NHL based on his time in Mini and based on his time in St. Louis. But I've always really liked him, on a personal level. How can you not like the guy? Just super nice guy. Yeah. And secondly, I've always really liked him as an assistant coach. If I'm not mistaken, he won a cup with the Penguins in 2009 as an assistant coach.
Yep.
So I think Mike Yeo did a lot of positives for this team, specifically with the younger players. One person within the organization kind of compared him like John Stevens to me in his approach with the younger players, helping bringing guys along. Pardon me?
That's a good comparable, like from the head coach point too. Like,
yeah.
Stevens isn't really the head coach material, but great assistant.
Exactly. Got it. John Stevens won 2 cups with Los Angeles, got a chance as the head coach and was fired after 15 months or so as the head guy in LA. Pardon me?
Darryl comes in and wins a couple of cups.
Yeah, well, that's it. And now he's the assistant coach in Dallas, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
So look, some guys are just more cut out to be assistant coaches. And I think Mike Yeo falls in that kind of tier. And look, there's nothing wrong with that. But at the same time, he was put in an impossible way. He never coached a game where Ryan Ellis played, ever. He never coached, or I don't think he ever coached with Hayes and Couturier in the lineup at the same time. Certainly not at 100%. By the time he took over, the season was already spiraling out of control. They accumulated some points right before Christmas. I believe they went like 4-0-3 or 5-0-2. Where they got points in like 6 or 7 straight or something like that. But this thing was already off the rails. We knew it was already off the rails. The guys didn't even have a stable coaching staff until February, for God's sakes. Yeah. John Torche didn't show up till, after the All-Star break. Mm-hmm. He had Nick Schultz on the bench. Ian LaPerriere was there for a bit. You had 3 different guys coach the power play. It was a disaster. It was an unmitigated disaster behind the bench this year. And none of that falls at the feet. Well, maybe not all, none of it, but I don't think the majority of it falls at the feet of Mike Yeo. That being said, when the record doesn't get better at all, and you can make the case, and I think statistically it actually was worse under Yeo than it was under AV.
Yeah.
And again, not his fault. No Ellis, no Couturier. We get that. And everything was snowballing by that point. How can you sell it from an optics standpoint?
Can't.
And if I'm not mistaken, when Fletcher and Dave Scott had their media availability back in the winter, I'm pretty sure Dave Scott said as much that they were getting a new coach back then. Like, he kind of let it slip that they were going to get a new coach. So I'm completely in agreement with you that, like, if people really think that Fletcher is only now starting to assemble a profile for a coach, like, come on. Let's be real.
Do you even consider investigating through the league office and other channels, Joel Quenneville.
I wouldn't. It's like, look, for one, he turned you down 3 years ago. Yep. That's the first thing.
Because he wanted to fish more.
That's it. So that to me, I don't think would sit entirely right with them. But secondly, it's like this team has to do so much repairing in terms of PR, not nearly on the level of what happened in Chicago. Let's make that clear. But in terms of reinstilling goodwill with the fan base, just trying to look better in the public, make them seem like they care, and going out and hiring a guy like Joel Quenneville, who was a part of arguably the biggest scandal in the history of the NHL. I just can't see how that would be a good look for the Flyers. The last thing this team needs is more negative attention. Yep. And you have to know that A, you get negative attention, and B, not like this matters, but you would probably make yourselves the biggest villain in the entire NHL.
Yeah.
And
why
right now,
attach yourself to the Kyle Beach story when you don't have to?
And you know what? It's one thing if you're a successful team. Like, it's one thing if you have like the Tampa Bay Lightning trying to do something like this. But kind of like with the Carolina Hurricanes when they brought in Tony DeAngelo, you could kind of mask it around like, oh, well, we're going to work with them, help them, become a better person, good winning environment, blah, 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 blah. But with the Flyers, I just don't see how they're in a position to do anything of the sort.
And you can also look at Carolina and go, Rod Brindamore is not going to let the same kind of shit that happened in New York with Tony DeAngelo and Georgiev and all that stuff. And it's not going to fly with Rod Brindamore.
That's it.
And you feel like, okay, we've got a coach that's so strong-willed and so structured and so respected that if anything starts to get out of line, it'll either be put back in line or it'll be sayonara to Tony DeAngelo.
And it seems by all accounts it has been that way.
Dude's been an animal this year. And have you heard any issues coming out of Carolina in regards to Tony DeAngelo?
On the broadcast last night, I don't know I think it was Ray Ferraro. Maybe he just said it jokingly, but he said that he's been a model citizen.
Yeah.
But when you have a coach like Rod Brindamore and a strong
fallout,
that's it. And it was kind of the same principle, and not to say that he's overcome these demons because we saw it this year, but it was kind of like when Evander Kane went to the San Jose Sharks and they had that group of veterans and Joe Thornton and Joe Pavelski and Patrick Marleau that they kept him in check. Now, as soon as that group, Burns, Vlasic, Justin Braun back then, but as soon as all those guys started to fizzle out, Pavelski left, Thornton left, Marleau left 15 times and came back, Justin Braun left, Brendan Dillon left, you started to see those bad habits reemerge. And I think that you need strong character rooms for guys like that. And, when you're dealing with a coach in the case of Quenneville, not to say that it's apples to apples, it isn't, but I just don't see the Flyers being an organization willing to take on that type of attention, to put it lightly right now.
Yeah. And look, he's a great coach. There's no doubt about it, but I'm not doing it either. There would have to be so much that I would have to learn about his testimony, about every element of that for me to even consider it. And who knows if the league is even going to reinstate him, at this point, because we don't know what some of that testimony, we have very little insight into everything that he testified to or that he knew. So, I mean, the fact that he wrote the letter for Aldrich after the situation and then he went on to USA Hockey is a real big issue for me. So,
very big.
Yeah, I mean, and that kind of shit just cannot happen. So I stay away from it. I think there's other good options out there. And he's not like he's the only good option out there from a coaching perspective. So we'll see.
I have one to throw at you actually quickly. This isn't me saying that I would like this, but what about Mike Babcock?
Yeah, because it blocks Marner from coming. But yeah, I don't know that this team could handle Mike Babcock. I don't know if it's the right kind of group for Mike Babcock. Now, he's going to obviously be different because he's going to have to learn some things. And he's coached, he coached in Saskatchewan last year at university. And I know his name was tied to the Michigan State gig at one point, I think, as well. He didn't get hired for it, but does he want back into the NHL? He's a great coach, no doubt, but yeah, I don't know that I need to go there either. I think when you look at some of the veteran guys, if I'm going veteran guy, there's some good names out there. And then I also look at like Rob Brindamore and I go, you got to find like that guy, guys that played pretty recently. The players have a lot of respect for. I don't think the days of a Ken Hitchcock where you can be that physically out of shape is ever going to fly anymore for players.
It's tough, right? Because like you put yourself as a player who works his ass off as hard as, let's say, a Mikhail Sergachev or just any of these guys.
Yeah.
And then you have this, 350-pound guy wheel in with Dunkin' Donuts for breakfast and just barking orders and pulling, do all these suicides and then get in the gym. And I think that
at least like Bruce played. Like Bruce is dumpy looking now, right? But Bruce played.
But he's also almost 70. It's a bit different. But, Hitch, like it wasn't like he was a pinnacle of being in shape back in, his 40s or ever. Yeah. That's it.
8 months old.
Claude Julien, same thing. Like, I mean, look, I think that there is something to be said about having a guy who kind of holds himself to the same caliber or the same level as he demands of his players.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think that maybe bringing in a guy like that's why I think like Maurice would kind of be a good coach just from like a personality perspective, because Maurice to me seems like a guy who could get through to any type of player. You could get through to a veteran, you could get through to a rookie, you could get through to a guy that's struggling. And you see the guys in Winnipeg, they swore by him. They absolutely love that guy. And look, that's not to say that it's a popularity contest by any stretch, but I still think that there is something to be said of like, yes, you need a good coach who's good with X and O's, but you also need a guy who can get through to this team, especially a group as fragile as the Flyers, which is why I'm in total agreement with you that I think Mike Babcock is not the answer.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what happens over the next calendar week. Ant, we'll do this again next Thursday. Check out Ant's stuff at thefourthperiod.com. And what's the Twitter handle? A DeMarco25?
You got it, buddy.
A DeMarco25. And thanks for doing this. We'll talk next week.
Take it easy, man.
There he is. Anthony DeMarco joining us on Bet Parks Presents Stick to Hockey Live. It is Thursday. Oh, it's playoff season. And we're doing a little something right now that we call Tones Takes. And there he is. There's Tone. What's going on, brother?
Hey, Jason. How you doing?
I'm doing great, man. The playoffs have been insane already. I mean, we get our first crack at game 2s tonight.
Yep.
And I mean, no, we've had a crack already at game 2s. Carolina went up 2-0. But I mean, fantastic card again tonight.
Yeah, great storylines too with all these goalies getting hurt. It keeps happening with the Louis Domingue in the overtime game, and then Ranta went down last night. Like it's in the Eastern Conference. It's crazy with these goalies getting injured. So and even in Nashville, Saros out too. So
yeah, well, we'll see if Nashville's not going to be able to overcome it. I don't think they could overcome it with Saros, but because Colorado is just insane. But you look, can Carolina continue to overcome it? Can the Penguins overcome it tonight in Pittsburgh? I wanted to run you my 4-leg parlay that I gave out on Eitan's show yesterday. I gave him Carolina -120. I gave him Tampa Bay +112. I gave him Minnesota to bounce back at -137. And I had a 3-way, no push Oiler line at -130 regulation, plus 1,089. And we boom, cash that.
Beautiful. Bitch. I love it. That's awesome, man. Yeah, I was on the Bolts too, and I was on Carolina -1, a little bit of value there. A lot of people were ready to count Tampa Bay out after one game, but I mean, you and me know what the history is with Toronto, and I think we'll probably agree on how that series is going to end. So we'll see.
The other thing too is, I looked at last night. I'm watching. I loved Edmonton in the game. I'm like, Mike Smith really screwed up in game 1. They're going to bounce back in game 2. But I'm watching the first period and almost midway through the second, and LA's all over them.
Yeah, yeah,
Buzzing. But
yeah.
they just couldn't break through. And then Draisaitl scores, and Edmonton ends up filling it up and getting a 6-0 win.
Yeah, I went Edmonton in the first period minus a half. I think it was a plus 140, and they had the two penalties, which kind of killed that. And of course, they scored like a minute into the second period, which always happens. But whatever.
Yeah. All right, let's get to Tone's takes for May 5th, Cinco de Mayo, and we're going to start out with play number 1. You're going to that Nashville Colorado game. Colorado was just an absolute wagon in game 1. Nashville couldn't get much going, but you like the over 7 here at plus money.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the alternate line over 7 plus 130. Should expect a little bit more out of Nashville tonight with their goalie situation too. I mean, they're not going to be able to stop Colorado, so there's going to be plenty of goals, I think, in this game and in this series. Bet the over is why you can, because the series isn't going to last too long. So, I think should a little bit more out of Nashville tonight to kind of contribute to that. But at 7, 100% with the plus 130, I'll take it.
They going Rittich again?
From what I've seen so far, it's Ingram is likely, so we'll see what happens.
I would go with Ingram
either way. I would too. Yeah.
Rittich can't get it done with Ingram,
right?
You don't know that he can. You don't know that he can.
Yeah, and who knows? Maybe it gives the team a little bit of a jump. We've seen that happen plenty of times. So,
totally.
Yeah, I would definitely go with him.
Let's go to play number 2. Let's go to this Calgary-Dallas matchup. I like in this series. I like Calgary in no more than 5. But you like the under in this one, and also going an alternate line here again. Huge plus money at 170.
Yeah, I'm going to stick with the under 5. Possibly risk a push in this game, but Daryl Sutter playoffs, when we saw it in the Kings years, there was a lot of low-scoring, grinded-out games. Calgary's a lower-scoring team at home. Dallas only averaged 2.5 goals per game on the road. I'm gonna go with the under here at 5. If it pushes, it pushes, but at plus 170. I think it's a good deal of value. We may see some goals in this series when it ships over to Dallas. That's what I'm kind of thinking, but I'm going to stick with the under here.
All right, so you got the under there, under 5 at plus 172. Alternate lines to start us off. Let's go to play number 3, and this is a shot on goal total here, and you like the over. Florida looking to get this series evened up at 1, minus 120 over 2.5 shots on goal for Huberdeau.
He's a monster at home. 32 out of 42 games he's hit this at home. 17 playoff games. He averages 4.05 shots per game.
Jeez.
Florida's trailing in the series. They are going to be all over the Capitals, and it's going to start with Huberdeau. So at minus 120, I'm kind of surprised it's priced this way, but you got to take it. I've been riding this guy all year long at home. Yeah,
I like this one a lot too. I think Florida is full value tonight, but to get that series tied up, I really don't think they liked the way they came out in that first game. They just looked a little shaky at points. And the play that Mackenzie Weegar makes is inexcusable. But anyway, let's go to your play number 4 and final play. It's also another over on shots on goal. This time, though, from a blue liner at plus 130 for Roman Josi.
Yeah, over 3.5 shots on goal. He had 5 in game 1. As we talked about, Nashville's going to have to push this game. So, I like to target some of these props in the playoffs with teams that are trailing. I was on Kaprizov last night, and he hit his mark. At plus 130, Rossi's been a good target on the road all season long. So, guy's going to win the Norris Trophy this year. He's a monster season. He's going to, be starting Nashville's offense tonight and all game long. So.
The best player has got to lead the way, and I think you're right. Mm-hmm. He's going to be insanely aggressive tonight from an offensive standpoint, knowing they're trying to match incredibly high firepower on the other side. So your dimers play, you got the Rangers minus 1 tonight, plus money there.
Yeah, plus 107, Rangers minus 1. Got to think that they're going to respond. It's still early enough in the series where you can kind of overcome a triple overtime loss. If it was later in the series, it might be a different story. Dominguez going to go
on the road. Pittsburgh. It's way more difficult.
Exactly. Yeah. Shesterkin's been a monster at home all year. I think they've only lost back-to-back home games twice all year long. So, going to go with the minus 1, a little bit of plus money, and maybe again an empty netter at the end or something.
Yeah. The other thing, Shesterkin makes 79 saves in a loss. That's insane. Yeah. Unbelievable. Unbelievable saves that he makes look routine too.
I know. Yeah, he's a beast.
Yeah, just
fun to watch. He's fun to watch.
Oh, Yeah. All right. So here are the 4 plays. Nashville, Colorado, the over 7 at plus 130. It's an alternate line. An alternate line in the Dallas, Calgary game under 5 at plus 170. Huberdeau over 2.5 shots on goal minus 120. And Yossi over 3.5 shots on goal at plus 130. Where can people get your stuff, Tone?
Tone Stakes on Twitter, and then also daily plays on dimers.com and oddschecker.com.
There we go. Another edition of Tone Stakes in the books. Cashin, man, good. Thanks for doing this. We'll talk next week.
Thanks, Jason. Enjoy the night.
There he is. Tones Takes on another edition of Bet Parks Presents Stick to Hockey Live. Great plays there. Enjoy the hockey tonight and get the plays in. Get them in on the all-new Bet Parks app. Oh, it's fantastic. The Bet Parks Casino and Sportsbook app, it is now live. And you got to take it from me. It is simply glorious. Awesome. Everything you want in a mobile casino and sportsbook, and it's right in the palm of your hand, right in your pocket. It travels. It's easy to sign up. It's easy to use. It's easy to navigate, fun to use, and faster to win than ever before. So make sure you download the all-new Bet Parks app, because new and existing users, that's right, both, new and existing users can use the promo code JASON750, JASON750, and you're going to get a risk-free bet up to $750. Terms and conditions apply. So again, promo code JASON750, and you get that risk-free bet up to $750 for new and existing users. Get them in on those Tones Takes as well. Download the new Bet Parks app today. You do need to be over 21 and present in Pennsylvania or New Jersey. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. All right, that's going to put a wrap on this week's editions of Bet Parks Presents Stick to Hockey Live. We'll be back Monday with the off-season for the Flyers continues, the playoffs continue, and much more. Everybody, have a great day. Enjoy the hockey tonight. Have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you next week on Bet Parks Presents Stick to Hockey Live.